everyone, this is Marika and welcome back to another session with me. So, as we are dealing with communication and education technology, we've already completed 5 units, right? We've completed 5 units and today we are going to start the 6th unit. So, in our 5th unit, we've seen what are the different principles of education and teaching learning methods, right? Different ways of teaching and learning. What are the different principles of learning? What are the different maxims and principles of teaching, right? And how can we effectively manage a classroom? So, today we are going to start the 6th unit, that is methods of teaching. Now, this unit correlates with the 5th unit, right? We have studied about the teaching and learning process there. We've studied about the principles. So, in this unit, we are going to study different methods of teaching, right? What are the different methods that a teacher can use while taking a class, while teaching to a class? All right. So, in today's session, we are going to see what are methods of teaching, and today we are going to discuss about one of the important method of teaching, that is lecture method. All right. Now, when I'm saying method of teaching, effective teaching is a very integral part of a good teacher, right? For a teacher to be called as a good teacher, to become a good teacher, the teacher should be able to teach effectively. The teacher should be able to impart the knowledge effectively, right? Now, how can you effectively transfer the knowledge to the students as a teacher, right? So, effective transfer of knowledge from the teacher to the learner or the student happens or is achieved by using or employing various student-friendly method, right? Student-friendly teaching learning method, all right? So when the teacher is teaching to the student, the teacher should understand and should use those methods that is effective for the student, that is student-friendly, all right? Now, as we have been discussing from the 5th unit, the main aim of education is to bring about desired changes in the behavior and attitude of an individual, right? So we provide education to the individual in order to make sure that they learn skills and behavior and bring changes in the behavior or attitude of an individual which was learned earlier, right? So education helps to bring modifications in the behavior of an individual. Now, since we are discussing about the methods of teaching, the method that a teacher uses or chooses for the class must be chosen wisely, right? The teacher must choose the method that the teacher is using for delivering the class or for taking a particular class must be chosen wisely. Now, the selection of the teaching method, right? Which method the teacher is going to choose to deliver a particular content, right? To deliver the class. So this should be chosen wisely and it must be chosen depending on the learner's ability, the behavior of the student, the learning objectives, and the nature of the task. So in our previous unit, we have discussed about lesson planning. Under that, we also discussed about lesson objectives, right? So the teacher has to see the learning objective of the particular content. The teacher also has to see what is the capacity of the students in the classroom, right? What are their interests and their behavior, all right? Now let us see the definition of methods of teaching. The style that is chosen by the educator in order to present a particular topic or a content in the classroom is called as method of teaching, right? So the teacher is the one, the educator is the one who chooses a way of teaching, the style of teaching, right? So for the classroom, the kind or the style that a teacher chooses to deliver his or her class, right? To present the particular topic or the content is called as methods of teaching, all right? Now, what is the most important thing in order to choose a method of teaching, right? Now, if I have decided I'll take lecture class today, right? I have to know the content that I am dealing with, right? So the content matter is the most important aspect to choose the methods of teaching, right? In order to choose a particular method to teach to the student, in order to choose a particular style, the teacher must be aware about the content matter, right? Today we are dealing with methods of teaching, right? So lecture method is a good way to deliver the class, right? To impart the knowledge on particular topic. But if I am teaching about catheterization, right? If there is a procedure involved, I need to choose demonstration method, right? Lecture method is not helpful. So the content matter of the particular subject, the content matter that the teacher is going to deliver to the class must cut is a vital factor in choosing the methods of teaching. Alright, so according to the different content that we deliver, according to the different types of content the teacher is going to teach the class, methods of teaching varies. Alright. So I hope you've understood till now what are methods of teaching, right? And why is it important in the teaching learning process. Okay, so now let us see the classification of methods of teaching. So as I said, there are various methods of teaching, right? It depends upon the subject or the content matter that the teacher is dealing with. It is chosen by the teacher, which is the most student friendly, which is the most effective for the particular content, right? So the teacher chooses the methods of teaching. Now let us see different classifications of methods of teaching. Now, teaching method can be classified broadly into two. One is teacher-centered and another one is learner-centered. Okay. Now, this depends upon the dominance that is enjoyed by either of the group in the teaching learning process, which means teaching method is classified into two broad categories, that is student-centered, that is learner-centered and teacher-centered, right? So, in this, it depends how much importance or how much dominance does the teacher has while the teaching learning process is going on, or how much dominance the students will have while the teaching learning process is going on. Okay, so who is actively involved, whether it is the teachers group or the students that are actively involved in the process, classifies the teaching learning process into two broad categories, that is student-centered and teacher-centered. Alright? Now, as I said, teacher-centered. In teacher-centered, it is the teacher who plays an active role and the student's role is minimized to a passive listener. Right? So here, in teacher-centered, all the methods that involves teacher to be active is teacher-centered method, wherein the students are just there in the classroom to listen to what the teacher is saying, which makes the students passive learner. Those categories or those methods are termed as teacher-centered methods of teaching. Now, what are the different teacher-centered methods of teaching? Lecture method, demonstration method, or bedside clinic are few of the examples of teacher-centered methods of teaching. Alright? Now, the next one is the learner-centered, right? In the learner-centered method, the students are actively involved in the process of teaching and learning. So, it is the students who are involved in the teaching learning process actively. Those are student-centered methods of teaching. Alright? Now, let us see few of the learner-centered methods of teaching. Group discussion, care plan, case study, role play, etc. are few of the student or learner-centered methods of teaching. Alright? So, till now, we've seen what is method of teaching and what are the two broad classifications for methods of teaching. Right? Now we are going to discuss about one of the teacher-centered methods of teaching and also one of the very important method of teaching, that is lecture method. The lecture method is the oldest methods of teaching. Okay, so as we are very familiar with lecture method, it is used right in our daily life. Lecture method is one of the oldest method of teaching. And as I said, it is a teacher-centered method, right? So in lecture method, it is a teacher who's active and the students becomes passive learner. So the lecture method is a teaching procedure which involves clarification or explanation of the facts or the particular content that the teacher wishes the students to understand, right? So in lecture method, it is a teacher who plays the active role and the teacher chooses a particular topic, right? And the teacher explains the topic or the teacher clarifies the topic to the students so that the students understand the topic that the teacher is delivering, the content that the teacher is delivering, all right? Now the class or the students listens, takes down the note, but the students do not have a conversation with the teacher, right? So in lecture method, as we said, it is a teacher-centered method. The teacher is the active person here and the students are passive learners, right? So here the teacher is explaining about the content, right? It is the teacher who is clarifying about a content to the classroom, right? The students are listening and taking down the notes about the fact or the content that the teacher is explaining, right? Even though the students are listening and taking down the notes, in lecture method, we do not see participation of students. They do not have a conversation with the teacher on the topic. Now, at most, if the student talks to the teacher, right? If the students are talking to the teacher in the lecture method, they may ask few questions to the teacher for the sake of doubt clearance, right? Which means here in this lecture method, the students are not actively involved. If when the teacher is teaching about the particular topic and if the student have a doubt, the student might ask few questions to the teacher, right? For the sake of doubt clearance, but there is no conversation that goes with the teacher and the student. So here, during the lecture method, the teacher continuously talks to the class and the students are the passive listener. So now, let us see various purposes of lecture method. The first one is to provide relevant knowledge. So now, the primary function of lecture method is to make sure that sufficient knowledge is provided to the students on a particular topic which is taken from various sources by the teacher. Okay, which means in the lecture method, the teacher is the one who collects the information from various sources, right? Referring various books. And the teacher comes to the class and explains the topic to the student in order to make sure that sufficient and relevant knowledge is provided to the students on the particular topic. So whatever is required for the students to know about the topic is taught by the teacher to the students. Next one is to motivate the students. A teacher alone cannot satisfy the knowledge needs of the students. So as we have discussed in our previous chapter, that only 1/4 of the knowledge is gained by the students from the teacher, right? So the teacher alone cannot satisfy the knowledge needs of the student, but as a good teacher, the teacher must be able to motivate the students to collect more information on the particular topic, right? The teacher can motivate the students to make sure that they go and learn about what topic they have been taught, right? So that what topic they have been taught so that they gain more knowledge by their own efforts. All right. Next one, we have to rouse interest in the subject. Through lecture method, the teacher can orient the students to the subject or the topic, right? The teacher can teach to the student what is the need for us to study this particular topic, or what are the different ways of learning this particular topic, right? So the teacher in lecture method, the teacher is also focused on arousing interest in the student about the particular topic or about the particular content. So the teacher has to make sure that she teaches to the student about different ways of learning the particular content or why it is important for us to study this particular topic so that the students understand the need for study and learn the topic effectively. All right. Next one, we have to clarify difficult concepts. Lecture method is highly suitable for explaining difficult concept, all right? So if any concept is there which is not understood by the students, right, which is difficult for student to comprehend, lecture method is the best way through which the teacher can clarify the content, okay? Now, how can a teacher clarify difficult concept? As we have discussed in the previous chapter, the teacher can use various illustrations, various real-life examples to clarify the particular concept or to clarify the particular topic. So till now, we have discussed 4 purposes of lecture method, right? The first one is to provide sufficient knowledge to the students, right? To make sure that the students gain knowledge about the particular topic that is relevant and sufficient. The next one is to motivate the students. So the teacher is not only motivating the students to learn what is taught to the student, but to find out more information on the particular topic, right? The teacher can also guide them properly about the knowledge, about the information that they gather on a particular concept, what is to be actually learned from all the information that they have gathered on the topic, right? The next one is to arouse interest in the students. The teacher can help the student become interested in the subject by teaching them why is it necessary for the students to read the particular concept or the topic, right? What is the need of study and what are the different interesting ways of learning that topic. Next is to clarify difficult concept, right? So in order to make sure that the students understand what is taught to them, right? And in order to make sure that difficult concepts are broken down and taught to the student in a good way, the effective teacher breaks down the difficult concepts and explains it to the students. The teacher can use various examples and illustrations to make sure that the students understand and comprehend the topic effectively. Next purpose we have is to promote critical thinking. So a thoughtfully designed and delivered lecture can challenge the students to think critically, hence promoting critical thinking. So if a lecture is designed thoughtfully and if it is delivered in such a manner, it challenges the students or it encourages the students to develop critical thinking. Okay, it will promote the critical thinking of the students. All right. Now, critical thinking can also be encouraged or incorporated by asking various challenging questions to the students, right? So when we ask various questions that challenges the students to think about the particular concept or think about the particular topic in an effective way, helps them to develop critical thinking. So, to promote critical thinking is also one of the purpose of lecture methods. By asking various challenging questions to the students, we can help them develop critical thinking. The lecture must be thoughtfully designed and delivered so that it challenges the students to think critically. Okay. Next one, we have techniques of lecture. So for the lecture method to be effective, the teacher must work with the students, which means the teacher must establish a contact with the students, right? The teacher must be familiar with the environment, must be familiar with the class and the students. The teacher has to quickly establish a contact with all the students and start to deliver her lecture according to the capacity of the students, right? The teacher must also give time for the students to take down their notes, right? So here what happens is the teacher is not in the class just to impart the knowledge or just to finish the session, right? The teacher should make sure that the students understand the class properly, and also the teacher should give time for the students to take down the notes. As an effective teacher, the teacher must go to the classroom, maintain a quick contact with all the students, right? Communicate with the students and then starts her lecture immediately, right? While delivering the lecture, the teacher must keep in mind the level of students' understanding, right? The abilities of the students, and then deliver the lecture according to their capacity and also give them time enough to write down the important notes. Okay. Now let us see various guidelines involved in the lecture method, right? So guidelines helps us to make any given action effective, right? So there are few guidelines that are to be followed under lecture method so that the teaching or the lecture method can be made effective. Okay, let us see one by one what are those guidelines that are to be followed during the process of lecture method. The first one is rapport. So the teacher must establish a rapport with the students. Okay, it is a very important aspect in any kind of relationship for any action to be carried out effectively, right? We have discussed this in the very first unit in communication and education. To maintain rapport with anyone we are communicating with is very important, right? Now, how can a teacher immediately or effectively establish a rapport with the student is the teacher must talk to the students, or the teacher must review the older concept or older lectures that were delivered. By beginning the class with a review of previous lecture, the teacher can establish a rapport with the student, or the teacher can also discuss or talk about the event that happened in the school or college. Alright? Next one we have voice gradation and quality. So the lecture must be presented in clear, neutral and simple tone of voice. So the teacher, while delivering the lecture, must make sure that her voice is clear, loud and it is neutral. Alright? Since the teacher is speaking to the students continuously, the quality of the voice of the teacher plays a major role. So the teacher has to focus on the voice gradation and the quality while delivering the lecture. So the teacher must speak to her students, and the teacher can use her voice to emphasize on the topic which are actually important, okay, on the points which are actually very important. The teacher can also emphasize on the topic by taking a pause at an appropriate point, right? So voice gradation and quality plays a vital role in lecture method, right? Because the teacher is continuously speaking to the students. It must be neutral, it must be loud, and it must be clear. The teacher must emphasize on important topics by using her voice, and also by taking appropriate pauses at a particular point, at an important point. Next one is proper body language. So the teacher must maintain a proper body language while delivering her lecture to the students. Alright, appropriate body language which facilitates proper communication, which facilitates effective communication, and also which does not annoy or irritate the students. Okay, so the teacher must maintain and look after her body language while delivering the lecture. So in body language, as we know, maintaining eye contact is a very vital aspect, right? The teacher must maintain eye contact with all the students in the classroom. The teacher must avoid looking out of the window or staring at the walls, right? And finally, the teacher has to move towards the students rather than just standing beside the table or the podium, right? So the teacher has to move towards the students, communicate with them, maintain eye contacts, and avoid looking out of the window or staring at the wall or the ceiling. Alright? Next one, we have control annoying mannerism. Now, annoying mannerism are very distracting to the students. Crushing the chalk by the teacher, right? Pinching the nose, breaking the knuckles, or repeating some words very often can be some annoying mannerisms which can distract the students. All these annoying habits of the teacher must be avoided by the teacher. Next one, we have elicit feedback from the students. Now, to a certain extent, a feedback will help the teacher to know about the effectiveness of their class. Obviously, when we teach to a particular group of students and when we take feedback from the students, we get to know how much they have understood, right? What are the problems in the methods of teaching during the class that the teacher was taking, right? So the teacher must take feedback from the students in order to understand the effectiveness of her class and to understand what are the different drawbacks in her lecture method which can be improved. Next, we have time management. Now, time is an important factor in lecture method. We know that, right? Now, certain teachers are able to cover their topics within the given time period, whereas certain teachers will not be able to do so, right? So time management, managing the lecture in a way that the given time is sufficient, is a skill of the teacher. The teacher must be aware about managing the time while delivering the lecture. In lecture method, time management plays a very important role, and the teacher should develop that skill of time management in order to make sure that the lecture method goes in a smooth way. Now let us see what are the different advantages of lecture method. It is economical teaching strategy. Okay, lecture method is an economical method of teaching, right? It is the teacher that is involved and the students. The teacher goes to the class and explains about a particular fact that the teacher wants the students to know about, right? Next one is large subject or large content can be taught effectively in a short period of time. Okay, so the large concept is broken down by the teacher and the teacher teaches to the students what is required for them to know or what is required for them to understand, right? So a relatively large topic could be broken down and taught in a small given time. Next one, it covers a large group of students. Obviously, lecture methods covers a large number of students, right? So it is effective in that way. And next one is presence of the teacher. Obviously, during the lecture method, the teacher is always present in the class, looking and watching over the students, right? Watching over the activities and moments of the students, right? So presence of teacher within the classroom is also one of the advantage of lecture method. Next, we have disadvantages. So first disadvantage is obviously that the students becomes passive in this process, right? The students are only passive learner during the lecture method. Next one is limited attention span, right? So during the lecture method, since the students are listener, the attention span of the students plays a major role. The teacher teaches the topic continuously to the students, and the students may not be able to pay attention for a longer period of time while the teacher is delivering the lecture, right? So less attention span is also one of the disadvantage of the lecture method, because in the lecture method, students are just listening. They are passive listener. The teacher is continuously speaking for a given period of time, right? So the students' attention span can be shorter than the time that is taken by the teacher to deliver the lecture. And the last one is lecture method does not allow the students to go with the individual pace of learning, right? As we have discussed about individual differences in a particular classroom, we have different range of student, right? Some are quick learners, some are slow learner, right? So everybody has different pace of learning. They have different abilities, right? So what happens in the lecture method? The teacher teaches continuously, speaks continuously. This will not allow individual pace of learning, right? Whatever the teacher is delivering the lecture about, the students has to listen. This will not allow them to learn according to their pace or their abilities, all right? So these are the various advantages and disadvantages of lecture method. So to conclude, today we have seen what are methods of teaching, right? And what are the classifications of methods of teaching. We've discussed about the first method of teaching, that is lecture method. We've discussed about what is lecture method, what are the different purposes, and what are the guidelines that are to be followed during the lecture method. Right? We also discussed about the advantages and disadvantages of lecture methods. I hope the class was helpful. I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you and have a great day.